Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah alayhi afdalu salam wa man wala amma ba'd. So we are now in session number 10 of our studies from the hearts of the prophets. And from what I can recall, here is the area in which we paused at. So we had looked at some of the guidelines to follow with regards to du'as and dhikr that are not from the Quran and Sunnah, but that are you write on your own or a scholar writes them for you. And we mentioned, is this allowed, yes or no? Is this allowed, students? Yes. But there are conditions, right? And we mentioned that some of those conditions, and this is also in addition to some of the conditions that we talked about. So obviously it cannot go against the basic fundamentals of our deen. You cannot have your own dua that you write that goes against the teaching of anything in Islam. So you cannot write a dua and say, "Oh Allah, through Imam Musleh Khan, I ask you to bless me." Can't do that. You can't have a medium between you and Allah, or through so and so, or through the Prophet ﷺ, I ask you, or "Oh Prophet, can you ask Allah this question for me?" Can't do any of that, right? So those are some of the things to keep in mind. Also, in addition to that, of course, it has to be sincerely for the sake of Allah, and that's the whole idea. That when you have these du'as, you do them solely for Allah, no matter where you get the du'as from, whether you write them or someone else gives it to you. It should be unrestricted by time, number, or situation. Because what did we say? When a du'a is restricted by time, numbers, or situation, where's that du'a from? If it has those three restrictions on them, where did we get that du'a from? Quran and? Remember that principle, okay? Any time in life you hear of a du'a that somebody gives you and says, "I want you to read this or recite these adhkar 40 times at 3 p.m. every day for the next 3 weeks, and your bank account will be beyond numbers you can count." Pretty attractive du'a, right? What an incentive. So the person takes that du'a. Well, first of all, there isn't such a du'a. That's not how du'a works. The du'a is even to gain more wealth. That's not how it works. You don't just, "Oh Allah, give me, increase your rizq," and then 10 minutes later you check your bank account. It doesn't work like that anyway. But the point here is that the 3 p.m., X amount of times, restricting the du'a is haram except what is narrated in the Quran and Sunnah, okay? So just keep that in mind. And why I say that is because there are endless amounts of du'as that people like you and me can find all online. And a lot of, I don't know if you call them shuyukh or what, but leaders out there across the world that do this for a living. And, they charge money even. I can write you 5 du'as and you'll be cured. So do you want me? Okay, I have a winter special going on. $75 per du'a. Just for you alone. Bismillah? Yeah, you can buy these du'a packages. And believe it or not, when I was in Medina, some hujjaj and some of the people who will come for Umrah and Hajj, I would meet them. And they would when they heard that we are students who live there, they thought we were the brothers of Jibreel alayhi salam or something, right? They were just "Can you just write your name on this paper?" Why? Because I'm going to put a dua and I want to sell this as a package. So I just want to show everybody I have a signature from Medina, from somebody from the blessed land. Can you imagine if I told them I was born in Medina? They might want to take me back to their country, right? So just keep that in mind. The meaning must be acceptable, good, and general without any negative connotations. Yeah? Yeah.
And then I want to do 200 in a week, or I want to increase over time, and they basically put numbers for themselves, but they don't stipulate upon someone else.
No. And the reason why is the whole idea of stipulating and restricting yourself to a particular method of by time number or situation is the problem. It doesn't matter who it's going to. It doesn't matter if it's just you alone. Where there is some room that you can do that is if you're trying to learn a dua, and like you said, you want to build a sense of consistency, you can do that for a period until that consistency is built, and you got to break it. You've got to break that routine. It's dangerous. It's one of the things that Ibn al-Qayyim has a whole chapter in one of his books, in the book of Talbis al-Iblis. He actually deems that people who do that, even for the sake of routine, could be, a trap of shaitan. So you've got to be very focused and very disciplined if you choose to do that for the sake of, learning and memorizing. Great, that's fine. But once that part of it is over, you want to be able to be in a situation where you can break out of that routine, move on to another dua. You can do the same thing. That's not a problem at all. But to stick to that routine and keeping it to yourself, it's no different than if you were to encourage someone else to do it.
So, like, for example, there's the dhikr, like, La ilaha illallah.
Yeah.
The Prophet said that whoever says it, 100 times, they get this reward, and then no one has done better than them except one who does more.
Mm-hmm.
So then a person can aim to do more. So why can't a person say, I have a goal to X number each day, and it's more than...
No. So, like I said, you can do that, but you've got to be very disciplined in keeping yourself outside of this parameter as much as possible. That's the whole idea. And the unfortunate thing is that, again, it's a trap of shaitan that as human beings we can easily be swayed and get comfortable and accustomed to a routine. So as long as you don't have that problem, and I'm sure that there are many Muslims and students that have that discipline. They know that when they reach a certain point, whether that's weeks, months, whatever, that they can break out of that routine and move on to something else. That's not a problem at all. So that's the rule of thumb behind it. So when the Prophet ﷺ leaves any dhikr or dua open, then scholars will still put certain conditions, basic principles the Prophet ﷺ did. Like, so the example that you gave about this particular hadith, although he says whoever does more is better, scholars will still tell you you can do as much as you want as long as these three conditions are not part of that practice, that routine. Don't restrict it by time, number, or situation. As long as you do that, do it as much as you need to do. So you get the idea, right? If you at any point try to implement one of these three things, the only way that the ulama allowed it is you've got to be disciplined to be able to break out of it. Otherwise, you just don't do it.
The last question was, so I understand what you're saying makes sense if a person says, for example, it has to be 250 times exactly. But what if it's not a specific exactly, but it's like around a particular thing? So you don't care if it's 250 or 249 or 252, then is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Whether it's like, okay, I'm going to do this 5 times a day, and you end up doing it like 3, but you're like, I don't care. 3 times is good enough. That's perfectly fine. No issues with that whatsoever. All right? Oh, yeah. Good question, by the way. It cannot contain improper made-up names or attributes of Allah. That is like what people will say, oh, Allah is so sweet. Oh, sweet, blessed Allah. That sort of thing. Can't just make up stuff, right? Especially when you're calling upon Allah by a quote-unquote name or attribute. You can only do that by what Allah Himself has narrated in the Quran and Sunnah. You can never attribute a title or name to Allah except what Allah has given. Right? And it's one of the basic principles, especially when you get into this subject of the names of Allah. It's one of the first things that are taught. Right? Dhikr cannot contain any strange language with unknown meanings. So I think we mentioned this. Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu says, if you see 2 people claiming that they have secrets about their religion, then know that they're upon some sort of made-up innovation. Right? And I believe we didn't go through this, correct? Okay, so this is where we will exactly pause. Go ahead. Yep.
A person makes dua, they say, oh, the one who has, control, or something like that, or
Yeah.
something generic, or the one who controls the mountains or something. Would that be considered a name or an attribute, or is that allowed?
No, that's perfectly allowed. That's just like you describing a connection with you and Allah. And the reason why that's okay, though, is because you can connect that to one of Allah's names and attributes, that He is Al-Qadir. You know, He is the one in control, and He is Al-Jabbar and all of these things, so He has complete authority over things. So if you describe something about Allah that connects you to an actual name and attribute, that's absolutely okay. Yeah.
There was a duo, I don't know if you know much of that prophet in Guyana, right? They call it Duo Jamila.
Mm-hmm.
And they had all the names of Allah. Ya Jabbar, Yakar. You know, they read the whole thing, the whole 1990.
Yeah. I haven't seen it in a long time. I did hear about it though.
I think they have a copy too. Like,
Okay.
so they give me a sheet. Like a,
But those are all actual names. Like there's nothing made up in there, right? There's.
Just say it, right?
Mhm.
I talked to Sheikh about it, and he was saying, you know, that is great, but it's the name of Allah. When I look back, I see the explanation. So people was cramming that thing when they was read it and then do whatever.
So let me ask you, when that booklet or pamphlet, what have you, was given to you all, right? Was there any instructions attached to it on how to read and use those names?
They said that in every dua you read it after the parts of Allah.
That's the problem.
Okay.
You see what you just said, that read it after every Fard Salah? That's the problem. Because that's where the innovation aspect now enters. So you can have the 99 names or a bunch of Allah's names in a booklet. You can title it Beautiful Adhkar, not a problem, because that's what they are. But again, it goes back to the same principle. If you're given instruction on any dua or dhikr, it has to match something authentic in the Quran or Sunnah. Otherwise, you literally ignore it. You exclude it out of your routine. Because why? For the obvious reason, if the Prophet ﷺ didn't do it, we can't act more religious than him. Right? Which is like a really, it's like a really weird thing that a lot of Muslims do. Like I go to some events sometime, believe it or not, I've met imams who frown upon other leaders that tell a joke and make their audience laugh, like just a nice normal, quick humor, and the crowd responds. I've had imams who said things like, "What kind of Sunnah? What kind of Islam is this? Teaching Allah's Deen, no laughing." They literally say that. Should be no laughing. Should be no joking. Like the Prophet ﷺ's Sunnah was like filled with pure unhappiness. Everybody was just miserable practicing the Deen. So those are the things that sometimes people, for whatever reason, attach these additional conditions behind these booklets. And like I said, there are endless amount of booklets. Oh my goodness, you can go on Google and you can see PDFs from now until the day of judgment of people who just took all this stuff, branded it their own way, sold it, and unfortunately created a lot of interest in the process. Yeah.
This might be a little off topic, but what's the permissibility around like wearing, certain ayahs of the Quran or any du'as?
Yes, it's absolutely fine. You can have a necklace, you can have a ring, you can have a watch that has some, an ayah or something on it. The ulama differ that if you wear that because you're trying to seek some sort of blessing from it, like I feel protected whenever I wear this Ayatul Kursi around my neck. The ulama differ on this. There are many who have said that it's a complete innovation and it's haram. But then others differed because there are some hadith and a couple of verses in Surah Isra and other surahs as well of using the Quran and ayat as some form of shifa or some sort of healing. And the Prophet ﷺ, there's actually a few stories of him where he would allow some companions to have ayat written on various materials, and they would carry that with them. They would have it strapped around them. and he didn't like object to that. So again, it goes in a lot deeper than that, but the general rule of thumb is, yes, you can have it, you can wear it. If somebody needs it for any particular reason, that's the part where I would just encourage that person to present their situation to a qualified sheikh and get a specific ruling on that. So, sheikh, I suffer, like I have jinn issues, right? I have a lot of wasawis. And I find that when I have Ayatul Kursi on my necklace or on, in my house hung up on the wall, I find that I'm relieved. I get some relief. So can I keep it? You'll find many of the ulama say, in this case here, yes, absolutely. But there's a condition as well on that. It is not the ayah that's healing you and protecting you. Who's doing it? Got it? So you can look at beautiful Ayatul Kursi or 99 names of Allah or what have you in your car, on your watch and so on. But it's not the actual beautiful frame and decorative thing that you have that's protecting your home. No. So it gets even deeper than that. But inshallah khair, I'll leave you with that for now, okay?
So if you wear those things,
Uh-huh.
don't you have to be in wudu all the time and don't go into washroom and stuff for those?
So that's where the scholars who didn't allow it say that it becomes problematic for those reasons as well, right? But generally speaking, you can go into the bathroom. You don't have to have wudu if you're wearing an Ayatul Kursi or some kind of ayah, because the scholars differ whether you have to be in wudu to recite Quran or not. Right? You know this. There is many ulama actually that differ. Because there is one hadith that talks about that you should be in the state of purity when you recite or read the Quran. The word that's used is tahara. Tahara can also mean just a general cleanliness, like you're not in the state of sexual impurity. But doesn't necessarily mean wudu either. Okay? So just keep that in mind. And as long as you have like something that something with an ayah on it and you kind of protect it. So even if you do this, you need to go to the bathroom and you just kind of cover it, that's perfectly fine. You can protect it, put it in your purse, in your pocket if you want. By the way, let me tell you something, okay? One of my professors, a student asked him the same question. He said, yeah, but he didn't ask it. He kind of just wanted to go back at the teacher and said, yeah, Sheikh, we shouldn't go into the bathroom if we have the Quran, the actual Mushaf. So he goes, what I do is I leave it in my bag and I leave my bag outside the washroom on the, in the hallway and I go into the bathroom. So the Sheikh had a lot of wisdom, he was very smart. So he looks at the student and he asks him, he goes, did you memorize any Quran? The student says, Alhamdulillah, I am Hafiz al-Quran. So the next time you go to the bathroom, chop off your head and leave it in the hallway. It was done. Student never talked about it again. Do you understand his point? Because if you have it in your bag and you think that's a problem, what about the Quran that's here? So he goes, the logic doesn't make sense. He goes, as long as you protect it, you can go and do what you need to do, right? But again, like that's general rule of thumb. Some ulama still didn't like that idea, right? What I would say to you is very simple, that if we have apps on our phone, what are you going to do with your phone? You know what I mean? And especially, don't even think about the bathroom or anything else. If you have like a Quran app and right next to it is like a Netflix app, there are definitely some inappropriate movies on Netflix, and you've got both apps sitting side by side. Like, if you look at it from the grand scheme of things, you'll see that a lot of this mumbo jumbo stuff just doesn't add up. Like, it's a very weird routine to get into, and it's not your fault. These are some of the things that we hear and we're told this is how you should do it as we were growing up. Here's another one. Have you ever been told keep the washroom door closed at all times because shaitan will come out? Remember, shaitan is the only creation that can go into the pores of our skin right up to our heart. You think he can't get through a crack of the door? Right? So you see, I'm saying, I know this because some of you look at me, I don't know, if I come to your house one day, right? But I've been taught the same things. But this is why we're here, right? Because you kind of like learn and then you're like, yeah, that was kind of weird. Okay. The removal of harm. So dua always falls in 4 categories when you're making dua, asking Allah for anything, right? When you're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to remove any harm or evil from you, protection. So either remove it, or at least if it cannot be removed for whatever reason, oh Allah, protect me from this harm. So that's the second one is more relevant to you and I in day-to-day life here, right? There's a lot of things that we can't like remove or erase. So you constantly are asking Allah to at least protect you from this fitna, from this trial, from this test, and so on. The continuation of what is good. What you already have that is good and blessed, oh Allah, keep me consistent. Oh Allah, continue this for me. Asking for a non-existent good. Something that you do want to adapt or learn. So we're going to look at each of those categories now. All of, by the way, those 4 categories come from this ayah. Or these 2 ayat in Surah Ali Imran. Okay? So the 4 categories that the ulama give us here, they all get it from these 2 verses. So Surah number 3, 193 and 194. Of course, these are the ayat that come close towards the end of the surah. And I did put the translation. So, رَبَّنَا إِنَّنَا سَمِعْنَا مُنَادِيًا يُنَادِي لِلْإِيمَانِ. So, O my Master, indeed we have heard a caller calling to faith. Believe in your Master, and we have believed. So, the fact that he says, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that, okay, they acknowledge that they believe, they asked Allah for iman, and they acknowledge فَآمَنَّا, and we do have and believe in you, Ya Rabb. So that's one of the categories, that if you have a good already, you already have iman, you want Allah to continue that for you. And it continues this way. So forgive us of our sins, that's the other condition. So you're asking Allah to erase or remove something bad, and remove us from our misdeeds and cause us to die with the righteous. وَتَوَفَّنَا مَعَ الْأَبْرَارِ رَبَّنَا وَآتِنَا مَا وَعَدتَّنَا عَلَى رُسُلِكَ. So you want the good now to continue. O Allah, grant us what you promised us through your messengers. So in other words, grant us the teachings of the legacy of all the prophets and messengers. Instill their teachings in us so that we can continue, live that sort of continuation in our lives and carry those values. And do not disgrace us on the day of judgment. Indeed, you do not fail in your promise. By the way, these verses, it starts off at 191 until the end of Surah Ali Imran. So, from 191 until the end are the verses the Prophet ﷺ would recite every single night he woke up for tahajjud. The first thing he would do is he would look up to the sky, towards the moon, and he would start to recite all of these verses. إِنَّ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافِ اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ لَآيَاتٍ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. All the way till the end. And the ulama tell us that I have a whole course just on the end of the surah. Like I have a course on Surah Ali Imran. And then I made another course because these verses here, the ulama say it's a way to test your iman. In what sense? How sincere and how pure your iman is. And the way to test it is that if these verses, you go through them, don't cause you to become emotional, you don't cry, there's no movement, that's one indication that you need to continue to work on your faith. But if you get emotional as you read and study these verses till the end, then it's a sign that you're on a good path and that you want to stay consistent now on that path. So they are truly life-changing and remarkable. And inshallah, I hope that one day we can do that. But those of you that studied Surah Ali Imran with me, we of course went through all of that. So let's go into who should you make dua for. So this is our prime lesson for the rest of the evening, okay? Who do you make dua for? So the ulama give us all the categories. So we're going to go through all the categories that the scholars give us, okay? And this is the first. The first group of people that you should pray for always starts with yourself. Just like when you're flying, and if something, Allah forbid, happens on the plane, who puts on their life jacket first? What do the flight attendants say? Save yourself first. When you're done with you, then you can help others, right? So the same principle. You cannot help and preach and teach to other people until you start doing it to yourself. You know, this idea, this principle of I got to work on myself before I work on others, how common do you think that happens? Where people focus on themselves before others? You tell me, like, don't you find that really shocking? That the deen actually came to purify and refine us, the ones who received it. But in our culture, like in the Muslim culture as a whole, whether it be here or anywhere else, it's so rare to find somebody that would be critical with themselves first before others. And that's why in Surah Saf, Allah starts off, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, lima taquluna ma la taf'alun. O people of Iman, why is it that you say things that you yourself don't do? You yourself don't practice. Like Allah asks the question straight out. Like, what is your problem? You have Iman, and you're telling everybody to do things that you don't even do? Like, it's a form of hypocrisy as well. Like the Quran highlights, this is one of the main qualities that make a munafiq, a hypocrite. Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah says that it is well recorded from the Sunnah that the Prophet ﷺ, that he used the pronoun me and not we. Oh Allah, forgive my sins. So he would make dua for the ummah. Of course he would do that. But much of his du'as are constantly him speaking for himself. Oh Allah, uplift me, accept me. Oh Allah, answer this for me and and so on and so forth. So forgive my sins. Oh Allah, I ask you to guide me. This was the most common way of making dua of the Prophet ﷺ. Now, before I go to the next one, why do you guys think this is rare? For people to concentrate on building themselves up before others. Why have we all experienced and seen that this is a rare thing in our communities? Mm-hmm.
I think that the ideologies that we're exposed to have a lot to do with like individualism and making your nafs poor. Like if you feel a certain way, then that's okay. And the Quran is that opposite of that. Like it's a mirror. It's a responsibility on you to reflect
Good.
what you can do.
I like it. I like it. So our whole society and culture, even the world at large, don't we hear things like, as long as you're happy, nothing else matters? As long as you do it, doesn't matter about anything else. Whatever makes you happy, whatever makes you feel you all the time. So the point here is that, okay, fine, you work on you. But for whatever reason, like that's not interpreted that you've got to work on you to become better. It's usually like I've got to work on me to achieve a certain status, a certain place, a certain amount of wealth or political power or something. So ultimately, even the goals that many people set for themselves is to at least become more superior or controlling over others. It still doesn't lead back to, okay, I'm doing this because I need this. So if you shift the concentration that everything that I do for myself, that the ultimate result is I want to become a better Muslim, then that changes everything. Then you start to like recognize that there are certain things my culture says it's about me, but it really isn't. And there are other things, man, subhanAllah, I really do need that. So etiquette is a huge one. Like if we talk about people are not patient, that's like the first thing you have to look in the mirror and be like, oh, how patient are you? SubhanAllah, these people, they're this, they're that. They're so rude. So how do you act when you're irritated? and you're upset, or you lose patience. If you do that, like that's something all the ulama do all the time. All the time. They write books on this. They write volumes of books of how critical they are to themselves. And that requires one very important ingredient that is really, really tough to have. And that requires you to have a sense of like humility. Like you've got to be humble. No matter what status Allah put for you. In my world with the imams and du'at and so on, we see this a lot. Like we'll go to like a masjid somewhere, right? And they have their imam. But this mashallah sheikh now comes in. So known around the world and whatever, what have you. But the imam of that community is just as qualified, but nobody knows his name except the community. This guy, mashallah, is on YouTube, he's blah, blah, this. He's got his own CDs or what have you, right? So he walks in with the idea, the attitude that he is entitled to be up front. Like his salah will not count if he has to pray with the congregation. He needs to lead the congregation. So he kind of walks in with the attitude that, I don't care who your imam is, okay, I'll take. And I've seen this hundreds of times, like literally walking into a masjid, and he'll just grab the mic and just stow i'tadilu. He's not the imam. He doesn't even live in the city. But he just felt like who's going to be better than me in this community? So, and that's how you lose it all. Allah can put you here in terms of intelligence and also keep you there in terms of sincerity. What matters to Allah the most? So at the end of the day, it's just like the Prophet ﷺ said, that a student of this deen that sins is like the candle that's lit. On the one hand, it is bringing guidance and light to people around you, and at the same time, it's burning itself out. And that's why you will see lots of leaders, like, sure, their views online might increase, but if you know some of them, they're the exact same person they are all the time, anywhere you go. The same attitude, the same anger issues, the same lack of patience, the same bit of pride. They absorb love, the admiration of people. They love those moments. I've been around speakers who said that I'm not going to attend an event unless you have a minimum of 1,000 people. But Sheikh, we have 800. 1,000 is my cutoff. Anything 1,000, you just get one of the other regular guys. I've been around speakers who do that. Like, wallahi, it's obviously, no, we don't have to talk about who they are, nothing. But just remember, like, this stuff is real and it's raw and it's right in front of our faces, right? So you're absolutely right when you say that this is something rare. And all I can say is, may Allah help us. Okay, may Allah just give us strength to remain sincere. Number 2 is for others. Now you can start looking at others. The Prophet ﷺ told Anas ibn Malik radiyallahu anh, "Oh Allah, I ask you for Anas ibn Malik to have a lot of wealth and a lot of children and bless everything that you have provided for him." Everybody know who Anas ibn Malik is? Radiyallahu anh. Everybody know this name? Who was he? Just one thing about him that stands out. What was it? Yeah.
He was, his mother appointed him as a servant of the Prophet ﷺ at a young age, so he used to follow him in service.
He was like the cook as well, the servant. He would tidy up the house for Prophet ﷺ. Can you imagine that? Oh, what a job. Like, you are preparing what the Prophet of Allah is going to consume so that he has the energy to go and deliver Allah's message. Like, you are linked to the revelation just as much as he is, because look at the medium now you become for the Prophet ﷺ. You're the person that's going to be responsible to preparing nourishment, energy for him. And Anas ibn Malik has a statement that every single person who spends time in the kitchen, you should tile this on your wall. Okay, the statement of Anas radiyallahu anhu. And it may not be for you. It's for everybody that comes in the kitchen. And he says that I have served the Prophet ﷺ for 11 years. And he never said to me, why did you cook this this doesn't taste right. He never complained once in 11 years about what Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu prepared for him. And if he prepared something that the Prophet ﷺ, I don't want to say didn't like, but he avoided eating. So something like onions, right? Prophet ﷺ never ate onions. But it's not because it was haram. Why didn't he eat onions? Because it left an odor. So why was that a problem for him? So we can have bad breath and he can't? Like, what was the wisdom behind that?
He's around people a lot.
He's a higher standard.
Keep going. Not people. He's talking to who other than people?
An angel.
He's communicating with angels. So this was an etiquette that was made wajib on him, that he cannot have any odor in his mouth. That's why he constantly had a siwak, and he constantly used it before wudu, before salah, and he had it with him all the time. So Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu at the end of the day says that when the Prophet ﷺ saw something that he didn't want to eat, he didn't say to Anas, he didn't even do this. Oh, you made that? No problem. It looks great, but you know what? I'm going to pass. He didn't even do that. You know what he did? You know how he would refuse something he didn't want to eat? He just stayed quiet. He didn't say a word. And that's how Anas radiallahu anh kind of knew, okay, he's got to change the ingredients up a little bit. Nothing. And, you know, the Prophet ﷺ, you know when we say actions speak louder than words? Oh, he had the loudest voice in his actions. So can you imagine, this is the Prophet of Allah and he didn't take even a spoonful of your food? Anas will probably sit there, like I would probably sit there and cry, because he's the Prophet of Allah. I want to serve him. I want to do this. So you get right back in and you try to figure it out. So the Prophet ﷺ knows that Anas is smart. So he'll figure this out. And kind of leave him to, okay, you decide what's best. He could have easily just said, you know, Anas, the onions, that's all. Just take that out next time. That's it. Because, you know, I talked to Angel. He could have said all that. Nothing. And there's a great psyche behind that. Right? And I mean, it's not our topic, but it's just very, very interesting. Anyhow, so you pray for others. You pray for yourself, then others. So we separate the two in the beginning. You start off with yourself, or you can have an exclusive dua just for others, not even make dua for yourself at that moment. So if somebody says, brother, please make dua. I'm going for surgery tomorrow. Please make dua for me. Like you could stop what you're doing, or in salah, and you can make dua just for that person. You don't have to start off with you and then go on to the person. So that's why they're separate in the beginning. And then the third category is you can put both together in one dua. Yourself and somebody else. You may have heard me, I've done it here a few times in my khutbahs and things like that, where if there's like a real serious issue, I would actually tell the congregation before we start the prayer that in your last sajda, take an extra 5 seconds. All right, I'll lengthen the sujood, take an extra 3 seconds, 5 seconds, and just offer a dua for so-and-so. Like when our Sheikh was in the hospital, and he was ill for some time, Sheikh Abdul Hamid. Like I said it on the mic for Raya, I said, Sheikh lahu haq, you know, he has a right. Because we go to him when we need du'as. Like we bombard them. Sheikh, please make dua for this, right? And the Sheikh, he never publicly announced to anybody to make dua. Just maybe the people that he was in communication with, just remember me in your du'as. That alone should trigger in our hearts that even if our shuyukh and leaders, they don't even ask for this, that you should take it upon yourself, you should remember them just as much as we expect them to remember us, right? So that's the rule of thumb. So then the third category is you put both of them in one dua. In the Quran, Allah says in Surah Muhammad that, O Muhammad, ask forgiveness for your sins and for the believers. So asks for your sins and then for the believers. So point is, both is mentioned there. This shows that you should ask for yourself and then ask for others. So even if you're putting both of the categories in one dua, who still comes first? Right. you. It was never reported that you pray for someone else and then yourself. You start with yourself and then the other person. This is the etiquette. So it's not necessarily a sunnah, but more or less an etiquette with dua. That you, when you start, before you ask Allah, me first, and then you move on to others. So it's more of an etiquette issue. May Allah forgive me and forgive you. May Allah guide me and guide you. Okay. Other than yourself, who else should we? It shouldn't say show. It should be should we. So that's like an error up there, okay? Who else should we make dua for? Yeah. 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 So we're coming to a section that is going to be a step-by-step guide. I'm going to teach you, or at least remind you, exactly how to make a dua properly, that your dua, inshallah, will be accepted. It requires very specific conditions, and if you don't have that in your dua, then the dua will not be accepted. So I'll walk you through it step by step exactly what you do. But in a nutshell, because you asked, so just very briefly, you start off with praising Allah. How do we praise Allah in our dua? Sometimes you might hear certain imams will recite Fatiha, or any words you want to do. Oh Allah, you are the one in charge. You are the one with authority. You are the one in control. You are the one that I worship. Oh Allah, you are worthy of all praise. Then you get into your dua. So first thing, praise Allah. Number two, send peace and blessings to the Prophet ﷺ. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, and so on. Number three is that you seek forgiveness at least bare minimum 3 times or more for yourself. Allahumma ghfirli, astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah. So you seek forgiveness at least bare minimum 3 times. After that, then you get into your dua. So you see 3 things at least. There is a 4th, but there is some discussion on it. So I won't touch that yet. We'll come to it, and then I'll explain the differences that scholars have, and then we'll come to a conclusion as well. But the point is that these 3, and then you can start to ask Allah what it is that you want. Now, some of the ulama also give that when it's time to make your actual dua, there is a method to do that as well. You don't just jump in and be like, oh, I need this job, give it to me, please, Ameen. There's also an etiquette of how you request things from Allah. Okay? So that will come in that section afterwards, inshallah, okay? So the first category, after yourself, take a look. Parents, and if any time in the sunnah you want to look at what the Prophet ﷺ said about parents, always go to Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. He has the most narrations and stories about a companion with their parents. Abu Hurairah is very famous for that. So when you hear about Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, don't just think about the one companion that narrated the most hadith, but his story is always linked, especially to his mom. So Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu loved his mother very much. And he actually, when he would see his mother, he would greet her in a poetic way. He would say, Assalamu alayki ya ummah. So he'll say, peace be unto you, O my beloved mother. Every single time. For his entire life, Assalamu alayki ya ummah wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And then he will make a dua for her. Then he'll like, so is there anything to eat? And then he just get into like normal conversation. He prayed for her so much. He said, anyone who prays for me and my mother, I ask you to shower him with your mercy. So you see what he says in his dua? Oh Allah, anybody who prays for me and my mother, show that person your mercy. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu never related any hadith related to the Hajj of the Prophet ﷺ. He never left the side of the Prophet ﷺ. He did not make Hajj with the Prophet ﷺ because his mother was sick. So just imagine, this is the companion that narrated the most hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. More than 5,000 is from his name only. And he did not go and perform one of the greatest acts of worship in Islam with the Prophet ﷺ because of his mom. So she became ill. And he stayed behind in Medina to take care of her. When Abu Hurairah became rich and the prince of Medina, he said, I used to have nothing. And he said that he used to put a rock on his stomach and tie a belt around it because he was so hungry and he did not have food. Take a look. Nowadays we wear a belt for what? We put a belt because we have too much food in our stomachs. It's like an opposite thing now. This is what companions used to do. And the Prophet ﷺ used to do the same thing. There's a famous story that he comes out one day after Dhuhr. He's just walking around in Medina. Just imagine the Prophet of Allah just roaming around in the streets in the community at the hottest time of the day when everybody's indoors, sleeping and resting. So Umar and Abu Bakr radiallahu anhuma, they see the Prophet ﷺ just roaming around. So they come out. Ya Rasulullah, what brings you out at this time of the day? So Prophet ﷺ says that he's looking for food. And Umar and Abu Bakr are also out looking for the food as well. And Umar and Abu Bakr, they lift up their garment and said, Ya Rasulullah, we are doing the same. And they both had these massive rocks that they would tie tightly and it would suppress the hunger a little, right? And the Prophet ﷺ, what does he do? He also lifts up his garment and he has 2 rocks tied around his stomach. So he's starving, a lot more than the rest of his companions. And the thing, that's when the ayah that was revealed to him, ثُمَّ لَتُسْأَلُنَّ يَوْمَئِذٍ عَنِ النَّعِيمِ. That's when he got the last verse in Surah At-Takathur. Because Abu Ayyub al-Ansari saw now, can you imagine now, you're in your home, you look out your window and you see the Prophet ﷺ, Abu Bakr and Umar just walking around in front of your house. What would you do? You'd literally run outside your house, I hope, right? Don't go grab your phone, like, can I get a picture? No. You run out of your house, and Abu Ayyub says, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. The 3 of you, please come. I'm going to go and kill a sheep and cook it, and I want to serve you. So, the Prophet ﷺ, when the meal was prepared, he sits down, and he says to Umar radiallahu anh to go and call his daughter Fatima radiallahu anha and let her come and enjoy some of this meal because she hasn't seen food like this in a long time. And that's when the ayah was given to him. So as he's enjoying all of this food and everybody else is enjoying it, when you're starving and you have the perfect meal in front of you, what's the one thing that most people forget? Not all, but most people forget to do. Just to be grateful and thank Allah. Just to thank Allah. Man, I was starving today. And I got my favorite meal is sitting right in front of me. Alhamdulillah. So the Prophet ﷺ stopped and he told everybody that to thank Allah for this food. And he reminded them of the same ayah because on the day of judgment, ثُمَّ لَتُسْأَلُنَّ يَوْمَئِذٍ عَنِ النَّعِيمِ. You're going to be asked about all of the noble gifts that were given to you from Allah. When is this ayah being revealed? What are they enjoying? Food. Food. One of the top 3 most wasted, items on this planet, wasted resources on this planet is food. And you can see shows and documentaries, like it's all on Netflix, all over YouTube. Just go and watch any documentary about food waste on the planet. And I promise you that when you read hadith like this and you listen to stories like that, you're going to just look at these things and you're just going to what is Allah going to do with us? Because look at the gifts that Allah gave us, and look what's happening. Like a restaurant will throw away fresh items because it's sat on their shelves for 10 minutes, and customers demand hot, fresh products. So if it's not sold within 10 minutes, start another batch. Start another batch. And think about like when you go into grocery stores and things like that, right? It's actually it's a very strange phenomenon when you go into a grocery store and you see that many options of one item. Like it's unheard of during the time of the Prophet ﷺ and working up towards the second and third generation after. They could not fathom or imagine walking into a building of unlimited food items, and on top of that, several options of the exact same thing. You don't have to just buy one type of ketchup. You can have 75 different brands of ketchup. Like things like that. And you just like, it's a blessing in some ways, but in some ways, subhanAllah, it's a real test from Allah. Mhm.
The story you just told us, is that during the Meccan period or?
The Medini period. Because Abu Ayyub al-Ansari lived very close to Masjid Quba. So this is when the Prophet ﷺ, they had just arrived, a few weeks after they had arrived in Medina. So in the Meccan period, there was no time to think about food and fiqh issues in general, right? They were too busy concentrating on building everyone's faith. So these ayat about food and other things, they all come from in Medini period, right? So anyhow, Allahu musta'an. And the point is, at the end of the day, Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu makes this dua, and of course he prioritizes his parents. What's the dua that we make for our parents? Or at least in the Quran. Here are a couple of other interesting stories of the past. Imam Abu Hanifa said, when my father passed away, I did not make dua for anything for an entire year except for my parents. You know how Abu Hanifa rahimahullah prayed tahajjud? He would recite the whole Quran in one rak'ah. And sometimes he would pray for more than 10 years. Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah prayed tahajjud with the same wudu from Isha. So what does that tell you he did? Stayed up all night doing what scholars do. When you hear that scholars don't sleep in the night, what do you think they're doing? They're doing at least one of two things or both. They're in research, because the prime time when you're studying ilm is that when you need to research new topics, you do that in the late evening. That's the methodology that ulama had for ages, right? So they're either involved in research, studying, figuring out how to solve the problems for the ummah, or they're reciting Quran and in tahajjud all throughout the night until Fajr. Right? You might be thinking it's impossible to recite the whole Quran in one rak'ah. Not for people who reach that status. Allah blesses their time. Allah blesses their energy. And the Prophet ﷺ is in battle all day. Okay, he's in war all day. When things calm for the night, the companions sleep, get some rest, and after Fajr, get back on the battlefield again, right? What do you think the Prophet ﷺ is doing all night? He's in tahajjud. There's no rest for him. Where does he get the energy to do that? That's one of the gifts Allah gives people who are engrossed in His deen, like engrossed in seeking knowledge. Allah protects everything, every aspect of their life. Even their health and their energy, Allah protects it all. So Imam Abu Hanifa has a lot of these really interesting stories. I'll just tell you one just because we're on the topic. There was a time he was eating a plate of food and his mother was in front of him and she's eating her plate of food. And Imam Abu Hanifa had this habit. He will never touch his food unless his mother finished her plate first. So students asked him why he did that. Never in his life he would eat until she was done. And he said, like, subhanAllah, look how scholars think, huh? He said, I have a fear that whilst my mother is eating from her plate, she might see something on my plate that she would want So I wait until she's satisfied and then I dig in. Just in case she's like, oh, you have an extra piece of chicken, huh? Yeah. So Abu Hanifa can take the chicken and give it to her. Oh, you have tomatoes in your salad. He'll pick out all the tomatoes and you see his mindset? He doesn't want to say no to her. He doesn't want her to be disappointed. If the thought pops into her head that she might want to try something in his plate, he wants to have that opportunity open and he'll just wait. Like, who in this day and age does that? That's where parents are. Those are the kinds of things that youth really have to learn. Some of the Salaf used to make the dua for their parents 70 times in their salah, in between the two sajdas. So they will make it like this habit, right? It wasn't for every single prayer, but this when you see these statements like this, generally speaking, right? Many of the Salaf would have this kind of routine. So the sitting period between the two sajdas. Yeah, they sit there. How long do you think it'll take for them to say, رَبِّ ارْحَمْهُمَا كَمَا رَبَّيَانِي صَغِيرًا رَبِّ ارْحَمْهُمَا كَمَا رَبَّيَانِي صَغِيرًا رَبِّ ارْحَمْهُمَا. And you're sitting there until you get to at least close to 100 times. So their salahs were pretty long. Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah said it is a common narration. Oh Allah, forgive me and my parents. Praying for your parents in every single salah is a must. Shaykh al-Albani rahimahullah also says that one of the times or the moments in your prayer where dua is guaranteed acceptance is just before you say the salam and end the prayer. So when you finish all your Tahiyatu lillah, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min adhab al-qabr wa min adhab jahannam wa min fitnat al-masih ad-dajjal, and so on and so forth. When you're done that dua and you're about to finish off the prayer, that moment right there is where dua is also accepted. When we say that dua there's a bigger emphasis at that moment. And Shaykh al-Albani in his book about how the Prophet's prayer described, he said, the dua that is encouraged just before you say the salam is the dua for parents. It's the time you pray for your parents. Quick question. Why? This might sound obvious. Why should you pray for your parents? Why is there such a huge emphasis on praying for parents and going out of your way and doing all of this for your parents? I mean, what if they weren't good parents? So, even if they're not good parents, you should still make dua for them? Yeah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said,
It's not really too excellent.
okay.
And brought you in this world.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Doesn't matter if they did a terrible job in parenting.
That's between them and Allah, but their respect, their honor has already.
I mean, look, don't get me wrong, because now you hear there are more and more topics about abusive parents. Like, just because somebody has a child doesn't mean that they're a quote-unquote parent, right? Because that requires a discipline by itself. It requires a lot of effort to take care of and raise your children right? So not all parents can do that. But the point here is not a single place in the entire Quran does Allah talk about what parents have done for you. Like they took care of you and they gave you food and they put shelter. None of those details are mentioned in the Quran. Every detail that Allah links to you and I with parents is all about the pregnancy and birth, actually delivering the child. Just those two. Especially when it comes with the mother. There's nothing about like how she like fed them or any of that stuff or how clothed them, none of that. Allah concentrates on two areas. while she was pregnant, that she carried you for all those months. And number two, when it was time to deliver that child. And then, of course, the first thing that's given to the child is the nourishment of the breast milk, right? So that's captured in the Quran. That's it. So that's where your gratitude begins with your parents. So Allah sets the tone right from the beginning. Okay, fine. If they didn't do their job as parents and raised you right, they abandoned you, they abused you, that can be dealt with, right? There will be accountable for that. But there's one thing you can never compromise, and that is you can never take for granted the fact that she carried you in her stomach for all that time, and she could have died giving birth to you. So it was life and death for her, and if she was fortunate enough to survive the delivery, those are two things you should be grateful for and pray for her. Now, everything else we can deal with afterwards, right? Scholars can tell you, well, in this case, you know, your parents are wrong in this. We can deal with that afterwards. But this here, there's no compromise. So that brings me to this ayah, the most famous ayah when it comes to dua for parents. رَبِّ ارْحَمْهُمَا كَمَا رَبَّيَانِي صَغِيرًا. What does this dua even mean? My Lord, have mercy upon them as they brought me up. Like, what are you actually saying? So, are we concentrating then that we want Allah to give them mercy? Now, we all know what mercy is, right? I've gone through that before. So what are you actually doing in this ayah? Are you just kind of like, oh, Allah blessed them because they took care of me? They, raised me. Like, what exactly? Or is it a combination of all of those things? What are you asking for Allah here specifically? Yeah.
The ending to me stands out a lot. Because when I was small, I think it's a surah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also talks about lowering the wings of humility. So I imagine that you're in such a vulnerable state where anything could have happened to you. And
That's exactly
and they
it.
took care of you. So even as you get older and you get upset about something or anything, it's like just stop. 'Cause
That's
in that
exactly the
vulnerable
point.
State,
Yeah.
they were there.
You hit it right on the nail. What you're asking for here is not that, oh Allah, have mercy on them because I got organic milk every time she fed me. She bought the most expensive diapers. She took care of me and I got the best clothing. I had the $2,000 stroller when I went to the mall, so I was real comfortable. No. It was the fact that you as a child can't do anything without her. That's what you're asking Allah to have mercy on her. Like, you can't help yourself in any way. So you're asking Allah, because of the state that you were in, have mercy on her. So you see how the details are thrown out the window, because that varies from every family. So the ulama explain in their tafsir with this ayah is that the mercy you're asking for is the fact that you were in that state and couldn't take care of yourself, and you relied 100% on somebody else to do all of that for you. That's the mercy that you're asking Allah to bless them for. Yeah.
Doesn't that not apply to, for example, children who are abandoned? Like their parents did not bring them up when they were small.
Yeah. And this is where those issues are dealt with separately. And believe me, there are some pretty awful parents out there, right? Till this day, that, as you said, will literally abandon their children. Literally give them up, want to have nothing to do, or they're just careless, they did something, whatever, met some guy, whatever, stuff happened, child came out of nowhere, and it's like, I just don't want to, I'm not ready for this, just go. They will be accountable in the sight of Allah. But the point here is that, here's another thing about this ayah. رَبِّ ارْحَمْهُمَا كَمَا رَبَّيَانِي صَغِيرًا. Your biological parents are always going to be the same, correct? But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're the ones that are going to raise you, right? This ayah, who is it concentrated on? Your guardian that brought you up? or the parents that the mother that your biological mother? Who is it concentrating on? The biological mother. So if she abandons you afterwards, that's case closed. You're grateful to Allah that she carried you and she still went through the pregnancy and gave birth. رَبَّيَانِي صَغِيرًا could include what you've mentioned. The guardians then that took care of it could potentially include them. So, and the reason why I'm saying that is because the ayah itself is not necessarily, this part of the ayah is not necessarily focused on just one category. So the scholars, they say that at the end of the day, whoever does the work and raise that child, they will be rewarded accordingly to Allah, but nobody's going to replace the biological mother. So she has always and forever till the day of judgment, she will always have that haqq and right, no matter how awful after giving birth she may have been, that she abandoned and she did whatever she had to do, if she was abusive and so on, neglecting all of her duties towards her children. All of that stuff is dealt with separately. She's judged accordingly for that, but she can never be thrown out and disregarded as, okay, you just gave birth to me, so that's not a big deal. No, that is a big deal. So just keep that in mind, right? So to answer your question, like everybody who takes care of that child and was involved in raising them, they will be rewarded. But when it comes to the birth and all of that, that's exclusive just to the biological mother, okay? And that's what these ayat are more focused on. One last thing I want to highlight, okay? Before this, Allah said, رَبِّ ارْحَمْهُمَا كَمَا رَبَّيَانِي صَغِيرًا. وَاخْفِضْ لَهُمَا جَنَاحَ الذُّلِّ مِنَ الرَّحْمَةِ. Shower or lower the wings of humility on them. What does that mean? That's what Allah said first, and then this ayah came. Yeah.
Like the ayah mentions that as you get older, basically, previously it mentions don't say even uff to them, so don't show or display any sort of that you're inconvenienced or that you're harmed or you're frustrated with them, and then basically have utter humility.
Okay. So وَخْفِضْ لَهُمَا جَنَاحَ الذُّلِّ. So lower the wings of humility. So these wings of humility is just basically be as respectful and as civilized as you possibly can, especially when your parents become what? Old. The ayah, which is a misunderstanding a lot of Muslims have with this ayah, it's not applied generically across the board to all parents. It's specifically targeting the group of parents that reach an elderly state. Because if you ever had to take care of parents who reach that state, that's really tough, right? Because again, you have to hear a lot, you have to do a lot, right? You'll always be criticized. How come you didn't put enough salt in this food? I never taught you to cook this way. And you'll be told that in front of your family and your children and all your friends and everybody. You know what you have to do in situations like that? What if you get really upset at your parents that have reached an elderly state? They frustrate you and they're always putting you down, saying stuff to you like, "Oh, you're being so lazy. Oh, make up my bed. Where's my shoes? I want my soup now. Why is that window open?" Just one thing after another. So what do you do in a situation like that? You just tolerate it, or can you at least say to your elderly mom or dad, "Can you just relax? Just chill. I'm doing what I can. I have my own children. I got my wife or husband downstairs. I have a lot to do, Can you just relax?" Can you do that?
No, I think it means don't even show that you're annoyed.
So you can't even show your annoyance, your frustration?
At that stage.
Anybody else agree?
I think there's a difference between basically in the moment becoming overcome by your emotion and then showing some frustration and disrespect versus at another time when you're calm and collected and you can discuss with them something and saying, "Oh, I would appreciate it if you do this way or that way."
So when they're when they're old, you can sit down. I mean, I get your point. It's a tough sell in the sense that, when they're elderly people, their ability to sort of comprehend and understand where you're coming from, consider feelings and all of that, it's a tough thing to do. So let's just assume in a worst case scenario, that, I can't talk to my parents because, my mom's 90, my father's 87. They can barely understand when I tell them what I make for them. They can barely understand. So I can't even have a conversation and tell them how they keep yelling at me all the time because I take too long, or I did this or I did that. Or my mom was calling me during the night because she wanted to go to the bathroom and I didn't get up in time. So I can't even say anything. So what do you do in that case?
Well, you need a helper because definitely, because if you have the practical
Yeah.
experience, you wouldn't.
So look, good. So if you need help, that's a different thing, and that's absolutely fine. But here's the thing: for us kids, that is a grind. You have to be quiet and deal with it. Period. That's why Allah said, "Don't say uff" in that ayah, because they are gonna test you to see how much uff you can do or say. And you're going to be tested with that every single day as long as they're alive. And as long as you're the one that has to be responsible, uff is going to be like a central theme in your house that you've got to be careful about. And it's a grind you have to go through. So if you're, mom or dad, you bring him his food and he's like, and he takes about 3 minutes to formulate the sentence. I don't like eating this. It's not, I don't enjoy it. It's too sour. It's too sweet. Hurts my throat. You can't say, I just spent 2 hours cooking it. And I only made it for you. My kids don't even eat. I got to go make something else. Just be quiet. And go figure out what to do. Whether you have to make just be quiet. You know what the ulama said about this? Why the rule was so strict when they become old? Is because they are inching closer and closer towards their death, and your opportunity to guarantee a door of Jannah open for you is going fast. So the rules tightened up towards the end of their life for your benefit, not theirs. So these rules are in place because Allah's helping you. Look, this is the last opportunity, because in a week's time, your mother is gone. Your father is gone. So there's the last door of Jannah open here. So just keep it together. Don't say uff. Deal with a bit of frustration here and there. And leave it at that. Last thing, and then we'll move on. وَخْفِضْ لَهُمَا جَنَاحَ الذُّلْ مِنَ الرَّحْمَةِ. Lower the wings of humility. Scholars explain what that means is you never present yourself in front of parents that you're superior to them in any way, shape, or form. So most of our parents probably never went to school. Any of you had parents, even parents that have passed on, did they go to school growing up in their countries? Does anybody have parents that didn't go to school?
Like my father, he went not very far in school.
Yeah.
He self-taught himself.
Good. And that's more common, right?
To be honest with you, he was not by myself, my wife, we had a good relationship with it.
Yeah.
Awesome, right then.
But my point here is that, okay, fine. A lot of the generations that have passed didn't have that opportunity. So when they become old, and all of us, we grew up here, we have opportunity to education and study and so on. We can pronounce all the INGs at the end of every word. But our parents can only formulate a few sentences in English here and there. You've got to constantly translate to them everywhere we go and so on and so forth. Allah, what He means by lower your wings of humility is to be at their level or lower. So you never get to say to your parents, when are you going to learn English? Come on, you've been here so long. I went to school, I have a PhD in it. Come on, Mom, you got to figure this out. You don't get to do that.
Going back to the point, he's very intellectual.
Yeah.
You always to keep him going, right?
Yeah.
You always have to, talk to him, but you start a conversation with him, the energy level.
Yeah, and that's how it is, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The imagery of the wings is really beautiful. It's not like you're like a bird that can fly, but you should pretend like you can't.
Mm-hmm.
It's beautiful.
I like that. Okay, 1 second. There's somebody that is here. that I need to go downstairs and meet very quickly. So what we're going to do is we're going to pause here. It's already 8:45, but they're locked out of the masjid. So let me conclude here. It's already 8:45, so it's actually the end of our class. So I'm going to stop right here where family members are. And let me go meet this brother very quickly before he leaves. So we will pause here, inshallah. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Wassalamu alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.